Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about Meghan Markle. Believe it or not, I actually have not talked about her ever on my channel unless it was in passing in a story about something else, which I don't actually recall ever mentioning her here. But unfortunately, I believe the time has come. Meghan Markle, I have made not really an effort, but I pretty much stayed away from anything to do with Meghan Markle. I think I experienced a level of overexposure in the sense of I can't recall exactly what years what was happening. I don't have a timeline of her life like that. But I remember anytime a critique of Meghan Markle would come up, it felt like a billion critiques would come up and a billion think pieces would come up. And it was too much. It was like I had so much in my face everywhere that I didn't feel like looking into any of it. Aside from not being interested, it was just like my curiosity really just was not sparked at all. A lot of this information, it turns out, you kind of internalize without even realizing, and then you'll say something and you'll be like, how did I even know that? So that's what being on the internet is like these days, and I'm not even chronically online, so yikes. I decided, I don't know for what reason, probably the self-hatred won that day, but I decided I'd watch With Love Meghan on Netflix. First of all, let's get one thing out of the way. This girl, this woman, this eldritch spirit can't cook. So really, why was I watching it? Just out of pure curiosity, because I saw a lot of people shitting on it, and I was like, is this just some kind of like wannabe Martha Stewart thing? Like, who gives a shit, honestly? But once I started watching it, and I watched quite a few episodes, not the whole thing, because even my self-hatred has limits, I kind of understood where people were coming from. So we're going to talk about that. The best way to talk about that, in my opinion, is via a relatively middle of the road article. So a lot of articles are very scathing. There are very few that are positive, but much like the extremes, the super scathing ones and the super positive ones, it's a little too much for me. So I found one article on Refinery29 where they basically call out the BS, but they also give her credit where they think credit is due. So I think this is a good place to start, so we don't have a super biased jumping off point. The title of the article is what got me though. Let Meghan Markle be boring in peace. The concept of Netflix's new lifestyle series With Love Meghan seems simple enough. Here's Meghan Markle, or as some know her, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. She is a beautiful woman that you've heard about in the news, with an aesthetically gorgeous life that in all likelihood is quite economically far from your own. Wouldn't it be nice, Netflix seems to ask, to let Markle tell you the supposedly easy things you could do to make your life in some small way resemble hers? Well, you'd think so. But this is Meghan the Markle we're talking about. The public's reaction to her is never ever going to be simple. If you thought With Love Meghan would be a smug, syrupy endurance watch and that you would rather fry your own eyeballs than sit through it, I have news for you. It is so much worse than that, wrote the Times columnist Carol Midgley. Is it as bad as we feared? Asked Telegraph writer Alison Pearson. Oh, far worse than that, dear reader, but at least it has the makings of an accidental comedy classic. Wait, here's one more. Meghan Markle is beautiful, Kirsten Fleming wrote for the New York Post. She's also boring, vapid, and entitled. So yeah, instead of going down smoothly, With Love Meghan has sparked critics around the star's supposed unrelatability, snobbery, and lack of a personality. If 2 out of 3 of those descriptors scream dog whistle to you, ding ding ding, welcome to the fascinating, infuriating world of Markle hate, where the racist double standards are strong. I'm gonna pause here for a second because I think 2 things can be true at once. So, do I think there is hatred towards Meghan Markle simply because she's not white, because she has a darker skin tone, because of her race? Yeah, I definitely think that there is some of that. It's very clear, at least to me, when I was reading comments and I looked at reviews, I kind of looked at the public feedback, right? To get an idea of like, what are people saying about this? What I saw was that there was a line between the comments that were straight up racist and comments that actually had a valid critique. Now, obviously we can't know which users are racist and are just dialing it back, blah, blah, blah. We don't know who we're dealing with, right? But the comments that are racist, for the most part, if they have racist intent, a lot of it is very obvious. A lot of these people who are racist against her and don't like Meghan Markle because of her skin, they don't hide that. And most of the people who have this racist intention, motivation, whatever you want to call it, don't have any valid points. So for me, all of that was immediately swept to the side because I'm like, okay, you just don't like her because she's not white. So these opinions to me do not matter because they're not based on anything except for bigotry. So that's going to be over there, not considered. You also cannot boil down any critique of her to racism and what's going to come up next, which always comes up with women, misogyny, okay? As much as racism and misogyny exist, we also can't always just say that the critique is based on that. Because first of all, it isn't. There is a lot of valid critique. And second of all, as women, I also don't think we should immediately run to say, this is misogyny, because at the end of the day, if you call everything misogyny when it's actually misogyny, no one's going to care. And second of all, I think women are also stronger than that, and immediately victimizing ourselves by saying something's misogyny when actually it's a valid critique does not bode well. Because really, if we're going to say that we are strong, capable women, you can't start crying the first time someone says, hey, this was dumb, especially if it's a valid critique. So that's my little spiel about being very careful about the terms we use for things and not just conflating everything. So again, this doesn't negate the racism exists. I'm just saying it's very obvious who has a valid critique and who is coming from a point of racism. So it's also very obvious which comments you ignore and which comments you might even think about and say, oh, maybe there's a valid point here. But I digress. Not all criticisms against With Love Megan have been inaccurate or unfair. In her Vulture review, Catherine Van Arendonk called With Love Megan an utterly deranged, bizarro world voyage into the center of nothing, a fantastical monument to the captivating power of watching one woman decorate a cake with her makeup artist while communicating solely through pillow adages about joy and hospitality. And honestly, what a bar. It's also a reminder, when it comes to Markle, it takes a keen eye to differentiate between fair critiques by media professionals and the rampant misogynoir that's followed this woman since the moment her relationship with Prince Harry was announced. Some people are just doing their jobs, telling us if a new TV show is belabored or boring. Others have a vendetta, some sort of point to prove that Markle's every move is offensive. The latter often involves calling Markle some crafty, hidden synonym for uppity. We just need to be very clear in differentiating what is valid critique and what is racism or misogyny or whatever. The important thing is to really make sure to differentiate and not lump them all together, because that's how words lose meaning. That's how people throw out words that they barely understand because the words have lost meaning. It's a very dangerous road to go down. So how do we parse the discourse around With Love Megan? Is the hate justified, or is it just another case of internet piling on a black woman for not meeting its irrational standards? And does the rubric on which the public and press alike grade Markle even make sense? To understand With Love Megan, it's imperative to remember how we got here. This particular narrative arc started in 2014, when Markle founded her lifestyle blog, The Tig. As Markle's version of Goop, The Tig was about living a worldly life, broadening your horizons, and aspiring for beauty and wellness in the everyday. In 2017, when Markle became engaged to Prince Harry, she shut the brand down, a sacrifice to help smooth her path into royal life. But, well, as some other British guy once said, the course to true love never did run smooth. That was definitely the case here. As a working royal, Markle's every move was scrutinized, from her choice of nail polish, entitled, to her love of avocado toast, drought-causing. Every action or tiny shard of personality revealed to the public was put under a microscope and used against her. Markle's pride in having good handwriting became supposed proof of her being emotionally insecure and self-pitying. The letter she wrote at age 11, protesting a Sex dish soap commercial, made some see her as aggressive and brandish. To put it simply, the woman couldn't catch a break ever, not once. Let's take this apart for a second. Certainly, especially at the very beginning, I do think, looking back, because at the time I wasn't super following, but looking back, I do think that she got a lot of hate for things that were really not that deep, or that weren't hate worthy. Like, you might say, this is annoying, this is stupid, this is embarrassing, whatever, but not worthy of hate. That being said, I really do think that since then, she has done a series of things that do not come off as not even relatable, but just likable. And obviously, you know, if you're shy, if you're introverted, you can come off as snobby or rude or mean or entitled. These are all things I've come off as because I am introverted and it's hard for me to talk to people. So all of these things, they've been said about me. So I know that things can be misinterpreted. I also think that there is a high bar for whomever is in a position like hers, or was in a position like hers in terms of royalty. Also because we have standards like the People's Princess, Princess Diana. We have such high standards because there are some examples like Princess Diana of someone who was basically universally loved, who had all the qualities that people were looking for at the time, who was relatable without trying to be relatable. There are a lot of things that I think are historically, quote unquote, in the way. Markle definitely doesn't fit into that mold. And I don't know if this TV show is her attempt to fit into that mold, to be relatable. But if you ask me, the most important thing someone can do if they are in a position like being a billionaire or being a royal or whatever the case may be that is making you part of the 1%, if not even higher than that, just acknowledge it. You don't have to be relatable. You're not relatable, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Not being relatable isn't necessarily the end of the world, and I feel like the more people bend backwards to be relatable, the farther you get from being relatable. Because there are plenty of times where I've seen shows, documentaries, whatever, with these characters that don't even seem like people. That's why I'm calling them characters. People who are so rich that it's unimaginable to how they live. Or people who are so talented that I can't imagine what it's like to be able to do thing X, Y, or Z. It's interesting because it's not relatable. You don't have to be relatable. It turns into an issue, though, when there's the elephant in the room of, oh yeah, you're a royal or we're a royal. I don't know how we are in terms of all of that, if she's still even considered a royal at this point, whatever. You trying to seem like an average person is really what the issue is. If instead we just all can acknowledge that you're not the average person, and that's also why we're interested in watching the show, because most of us don't want to watch a show about our neighbors, that's fine. But you gotta realize that for most people, decorating these cakes, blah, 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 a lot of people today can't even fucking afford eggs, okay? So you're not going to be relatable basically no matter what. And that is okay. The press and the public's relationship to Markle has been rooted in misogynoir since the moment her relationship with Prince Harry became public. They called her straight out of Compton and used white women's alleged tears to vilify her. Markle was so horrifically treated by the press, the public, and reportedly the royal family that the experience very directly drove her to suicidal ideation. "I didn't want to be alive anymore," Markle told Oprah. In 2020, as a direct result of all of the above, Markle and Prince Harry stepped back from their senior positions in the royal family. Without the financial backing provided to senior royals, and with their son Prince Archie to protect, Markle and Prince Harry needed money and fast. They needed a new place to live that could shield them from paparazzi scaling walls. They also required extraordinarily expensive security detail to protect them from daily death threats. So they signed many million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify. Read that last paragraph again and ask yourself a question. Is relatability a fair scale to judge Meghan Markle on when those are the realities of her life? With Love Meghan feels like a grasp backwards in time, an attempt to reclaim what was lost when Markle shut down the TIG. It's got the earnest energy of the 20-teens, but also very much has changed in Markle's life since then. These changes, a desperate need for privacy, security, and to placate the masses, put With Love Meghan between a rock and a hard place. It can be hard to connect when there's a clear layer of protective armor between host and audience. And so there's a lot here, but I will agree that definitely I think there is a shield that she's put around herself for obvious reasons. When you get critiqued in that way, obviously I cannot relate to what she went through, but it's understandable that you would shield yourself. That being said, also, when we're really focusing on the relatability thing, like this article points out, when you're being paid millions of dollars to do, and apologies for how I'm about to put this, fuck-ass podcasts and fuck-ass shows, it's like, okay, shit was rough, you were treated poorly, there was likely, according to her anyway, there was racism involved. All of that, her experiences, they're valid experiences, but at the end of the day, a lot of people go through all of this and they don't get million-dollar deals to fuck around in a kitchen that's not even your own kitchen and prepare for parties and do all this stuff. So as much as I think people do have a level of empathy for her, it's also like your relatability is not there the moment you have million-dollar deals to do shit that you're not an expert in, that you're not trained in, and that arguably I don't think anyone cares to see. That's the harsh part, and there are going to be a lot of harsh parts here, but I will give the credit or the leniency where it is due. The moment you started dating Harry, your relatability is... Much has been made, for example, of the fact that With Love Meghan was not filmed in Markle's own Montecito home, but in a rental nearby. Our kitchen is where Mama just cooks for the family, Markle told People about her decision to protect her home space, and with a crew of 80 plus people, that's a lot of people to have in your house. In many comment sections and media critiques alike, her choice to film elsewhere has lent itself to accusations of inauthenticity. But let's make something clear. The vast majority of this genre of show are filmed on sets. Martha Stewart Living may have started at Stewart's own home, but it eventually moved to a studio. The Martha Stewart Show and Rachel Ray were both filmed in front of studio audiences. Giada De Laurentiis' Giada at Home was filmed at a rental. It's no coincidence these white women didn't face the same intense scrutiny for doing what lifestyle shows do. With long hours and an 80-person crew, filming in a designated workspace is the most practical choice. That's without even taking into account Markle's extraordinary circumstances, like the paparazzi known for casing and planting cameras around her residences. If that was your daily reality, would you want to make the layout of your home public? Because I wouldn't. Now, funnily enough, there's something I relate to here. Now, obviously, I'm not at the levels of Meghan Markle, duh, but even I don't show the layout of my house because I have been doxxed because people are insane. So on that, you don't have to sell anything. I am totally on board. The only thing that I'm going to point out that I think this article may have glossed over is that Martha Stewart and Rachel Ray and whoever else was named, none of these people were part of a royal family. So as much as I'm sure there's an angle there that has to do with race or misogyny, I think for me, it's actually not about that as much as it's about the royal family. Because any association to the royal family, realistically, for us peasants, immediately separates you from not just relatability, but from the general world populace. So Martha Stewart, if she had been a royal, I think she would have been critiqued to hell. The same way with Rachel Ray. That's an extra part of the context that you can't just take out. So when you say that people were nicer about Martha Stewart and Rachel Ray, yeah, maybe they're more likable. I don't know. I've never watched either of them. But there's also the royal factor, and that is such a massive factor. You cannot just leave that out. So I do think that needs to be put in the equation. Aside from that, Martha Stewart and Rachel Ray, as shitty as this sounds, the public is going to categorize you, right? So when you become a duchess, for example, you are boxed into that, right? And there are expectations of you based on that title. Being people who are known for just their craft, like Martha Stewart or Rachel Ray, they're choosing their box. So they say, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm going to invest in that, and I'll be known for that. On the contrary, Meghan Markle married into the royal family, and by definition, you will be known as a royal or someone who's married to a royal, however you guys want to put it. So when you, the royal, decide to do something like this, it's not as simple as when Rachel Ray or Martha Stewart did it. So I don't really think those are fair comparisons to begin with because the circumstances are so wildly different that it's just kind of like there's no common ground here. Like you guys might be talking about cooking and curtains or whatever the fuck, but there's very little common ground, realistically. With Love, Meghan is as gentle and benign as can be. Markle emphasizes in every episode that we're not in pursuit of perfection, we're in pursuit of joy. You guys know, I'm not a positive person. I don't really care for little sayings that look like things that are sold on magnets at Barnes & Noble. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, it has to be joyful. Like, truly, I'm not the one for that, so I'm just gonna say, to me, that reads as inauthentic because it just sounds like stupid shit you see on a fucking card. But for a lot of people following Markle's every move, anything other than perfection is unacceptable. She knows that, and we know that. As a result, privacy and discretion are the unspoken core of With Love, Meghan, and that creates some of the problems people are picking up on. Now, this is where I'm gonna give you not a story time, but my experience watching the show. First of all, I can't cook for shit, okay? So I'm not gonna comment on anything of the culinary sphere. If you are trying to be a relatable cook, right? There's a part in an episode where I can't remember who it is, asks about her outfit. I don't know if it was Mindy Kaling. I can't remember. Anyway, someone asks about her outfit, and I think she says her pants are from Zara. Something is from Zara, and then something is from the Italian high-end brand, Loro Piana. So Loro Piana is very well known for being extremely exclusive, to the point where it's in the exclusive levels of, in my opinion, quiet high fashion. So it's the type of shit that has basically no logos. It's not going to be recognized, but it's extremely expensive, extremely high quality. And even a lot of people who I know that are like fashion influencers, who I know as in who I follow, who are fashion influencers, don't know shit about Loro Piana. That's the type of brand it is. If you say, or show us, I guess, with a lot of cuts, that you're cooking or baking something, and you're dressed in all white, to begin with. You're not wearing an apron. You're wearing loro piana to cook, which is insane. And also, you have a little cardigan draped over your shoulder, not even tied, not even like the golf tie, like over your shoulders, just draped over your shoulders like this. But none of that is relatable, right? Most people will just be wearing average clothes, especially if you think you're going to get dirty. A lot of people wear sweats or jeans or a t-shirt. And if that's not your style, that's fine. A lot of people will wear an apron or have like a towel slung over their shoulder. It'll be a little bit messy. None of it here is messy. And granted, it's curated, it wants to be clean, and that is fine. But if we're going for authenticity, there has to be a little bit of sloppiness here and there because cooking is messy to a degree by definition. There has to be a little bit of the human element. If you are dressed in pristine white with a sweater just hanging over your shoulders, so if you lean, the sweater sleeves would go into a pan, yeah, I'm sorry, it does not read like you're actually cooking or doing anything in a natural way. Especially because this isn't filmed at her house, which I already explained completely makes sense. But it's also like, when you're talking about cooking for your kid, it's like if your kid's running around and if we were at your house, is this what you would be wearing? Because that's also part of it. It's like, granted, Archie isn't there, you're not at home, but you can still wear and basically embody the same attitude of when you're cooking. Because honestly, I feel like that would have made a very big difference. Wearing jeans and a tee or whatever she wears to cook for their kid, I think would have come off as more authentic. But that is just my silly little opinion. Megan lovingly mentions the kids throughout. Archie's partial to Goldenberries. Lily has patented cleanup song, but always with a high gloss of perfection, Michelle Rees pointed out in British Vogue. Do they ever lick icing off the mixer, not eat vegetables daily? But imagine for a second the likely scenario if Markle did share those stories about her children. The headlines and rabid comment sections debating whether she's a neglectful or narcissistic mother because there was one Wednesday when her children didn't get their rainbow fruit plate. My theory is that so much of the distance between Markle and the audience in With Love Megan's first season lies in how self-conscious she is about how people see her, and understandably so. You can see in the show's first episode when Markle teaches makeup artist and friend Daniel Martin to make a one-pan spaghetti. When I make this, I make it for my family, she started, then stopped herself, laughing nervously. Not that my children are eating heaps of noodles, but I'll make enough that I can put leftovers in their lunchboxes. No real comment on this section. It's understandable why she's nervous. She knows that she's disliked, and fair enough, you're trying to do what you can. At the same time, I really do think having something highly curated really does up the unrelatability element. But then again, maybe for her, this is just a losing game in the sense of she just will never be able to win. I just don't really think there's enough perspective from the average Joe. So maybe she needs someone on her team who is kind of an average Joe. Because my impression, and I could be wrong, is that she's surrounded by a bunch of yes men. I personally don't care if Markle's children gorge themselves on delicious, vaguely artisanal spaghetti until they vomited. That sounds like a perfect day in the life of a 5-year-old, but there would have been think piece on think piece if Markle revealed anything at all worth debating about her kids. This is the catch-22. It's impossible to be inviting and defensive at the same time. Markle needs money. She's also building a new lifestyle brand, a TIG 2.0, with as ever. An aspirational energy is key in these pursuits, but so is connection, and connection is made very complicated when you're trying to engage with a public that played a role in making you want to die. There's a stilted quality to Markle. It's visible in the season's most viral moment when Markle corrected guest Mindy Kaling for referring to her as, Meghan Markle. I'm a Sussex now, she said, smiling and talking through clenched teeth. She went on to tell Kaling how important it is for her to have the same surname as her children. Holy pretentiousness, Batman, wrote one TikTok commenter. Meghan is bringing fake humble mean girl energy, wrote another. Why is it, again, that we expect humility from Black women? We don't know. The moment with Kaling is awkward, sure. It's also gone in a flash. To assign much depth to the interaction is to grasp at straws, desperate for gossip in a fresh lavender-scented wasteland. The fact that this is the biggest scandal people can pull from this show is further proof that the excessive disdain is unwarranted. Clean as you go, Markle repeats throughout the series, wiping away vegetable detritus and candle-making string so as to not make us look at messy counters. Clean as you go seems to be the show's philosophy in a bigger way as well. Now, I think the moment with Mindy Kaling was actually very telling because I'll insert a clip of it here if it doesn't get copyrighted, but I remember seeing that before I actually watched the show. And it was so awkward and uncomfortable.
I don't think anyone in the world knows that Meghan Markle has eaten Jack in the Box and loves it.
It's so funny, too, that you keep saying Meghan Markle. You know I'm Sussex now. You have kids, and you go, no, I share my name with my children.
Yes.
And that feels so, I didn't know how meaningful it would be to me, but it just means so much to go, this is our family name, our little family name.
Well, now I know, and I love it.
You know, it's such an unnecessary comment to make. And granted, I understand, you know, wanting to have the same last name as your kids or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, in the context of your show, does it really matter if she calls you Meghan Markle? Like, does it really change, you know, like the bows or the labels you're gonna put on your Trader Joe's shit? It seems a little bit petty. And that's what people were mad about. And I completely understand that, because in this particular instance, I don't think it has anything to do with holding a Black woman at a higher standard. I think this would have come off as unnecessary from anyone. And in fact, another person who isn't white also thought, I don't know what she thought, but she clearly seemed uncomfortable, probably for the same reasons that everyone watching was just kind of like, did we really need to turn this into a thing? And then she turned it into a thing. So in this particular respect, I don't really think it's about holding Black women to a different standard in this particular example. I think here it's just someone who's being very, very particular. The same way that when some people mispronounce my name, I don't necessarily correct them if it's really not worth it in whatever situation I'm in. And that happens often. With Love Meghan is perfect laundry folding TV. It is not meant to be watched with rapt attention. You are supposed to put it on in the background of your regular life and let Markle and her rotating cast of buddies convince you that you too can salt bake a fish. This is a show about sanding down life's edges. It's about making your world more beautiful. It's not about all the regular or even ugly moments in between. The series has no room for anger, sadness, or even the messy moments of Markle's history we all know about. It's hard to say how much of that is for our sakes. Don't we deserve some smooth brain TV, and what's for hers? But here's what I actually did learn about Markle's personality watching with Love Meghan. She is so not cool. I mean that with absolutely no judgment. In fact, Markle's awkwardness was the thing that entertained me most while watching the show. Despite her undeniable beauty and the chicness of her loro piana, Markle is the type of person who calls her friends gals without a hint of irony. She looked stricken and confused when Kaling asked about her look, not at all understanding that she was asking about her outfit. She is stiff and stilted a lot of the time, overconscious of her words and her body. She seems to channel this nervous energy into the aforementioned smoothing, making bath salts, and repackaging Trader Joe's pretzels in an attempt to make a horrible world seem less harsh. With Love Meghan is a coping mechanism in more ways than one. Now, feeling awkward and uncomfortable makes sense considering what we talked about with the criticism that Meghan has received. Some of it deserved and some of it undeserved. And when I say the undeserved criticism, I'm really talking about what isn't criticism and what's just straight up racism, okay? So those things. I think the issue is that this is smooth brain content, as this article said. I think the thing is that for me, anyway, smooth brain content has to read as authentic. If I see someone who basically seems to be a costumed actor acting in a role, which is kind of what I felt like when I was watching Meghan Markle, it doesn't come off as authentic, which then kind of throws off any type of smooth brain content, because if you're supposed to be watching it in the background, it's supposed to be smooth. This comes off as disjointed and weird, not just because of the awkwardness, but because there are these things where she's like, oh, do things with love or with joy or whatever you see embroidered on pillows, right? That. But then 2 seconds later, she's like, oh, well, you know I'm a Sussex now. And so it's like, okay, well, I have a very hard time putting a bar of where I expect her to be. And maybe part of that is the problem, quote unquote, with audiences, is that there's this unpredictable shift of attitude, it seems. So like there are times when she's just very, you know, hippy dippy. And then there are times where all of a sudden, like the mid-Kaling moment where she'll be like, you know, I'm a Sussex now. And the way she said it definitely was so awkward. So I think that's part of it, that there isn't really a consistency. And, you know, some of that might just come in time because, granted, people don't know her under this light of, you know, being a homemaker, I guess we could call her. I don't even know if that's the right term, but you get it. That kind of lifestyle content. We don't know her as a lifestyle content creator yet. It's too soon, in my opinion, to come to a massive conclusion. For sure, I can say this content isn't for me because it does read as inauthentic. and disingenuous. I didn't learn anything from it. I think it's dumb to get a Trader Joe's bag of pretzels and then put them in a Ziploc or whatever the fuck, or a fucking mason jar with a label that says pretzels. I think that's dumb. I think that's wasteful. I think that's a waste of time. Also, I think that's what makes her less relatable, because if you're a mom with 2 kids, do you have time to do all this stupid shit? Most people probably don't. And that's not to say that you doing your labeled containers is the end of the world. But certainly it will affect how people look at you, because if you want to be relatable, you need to keep into account that most people don't have hours to throw away over, repackaging things and making silly cakes or making things for parties, these gift bags. And they're all nice things, but again, between the attitude and what you're doing being unrelatable, again, let us just refer to people not being able to afford eggs, you get that this isn't really reading the room. I'm going to skip one paragraph because it's kind of repetitive of what I just read, but it says, for season 2, which Netflix recently announced, I have one tip for Markle and her producers: up the music budget. When I have a little bit of time at the end of the day, I do this: have a glass of wine and enjoy it, Markle said while demonstrating how to make a beautiful floral arrangement. I also do this typically with a lot of music. What track would you be listening to right now? Her director asked. Depends, she said. I listen to a lot of 70s soft rock, a lot of yacht rock, and a lot of soul, and then also French dinner party music. These shows are 90% vibes. If With Love, Megan won't give us the raw edges of this woman's personality, and honestly, why should it? Then the least it could offer is the authenticity of Meghan Markle swigging wine and jamming out to yacht rock. Next time, Netflix, give us the music too. This is what we should be fighting over. So overall, I thought the show was pretty bad. Honestly, I didn't watch all of it, and I knew I wasn't going to, because realistically, I'm not the target demographic for that type of lifestyle stuff. But I will say it does come off as inauthentic, and even just down to like the clothing choice. And so when she's saying that she's cooking and she does all this stuff, there are a lot of theories online as well, showing how the pie looked in the pie plate form thing. See, this is why I don't cook. And then how it ended up looking, and they're saying that they're 2 different pies, that basically they filmed a version where she's making it, but then in reality someone else made it, blah, blah, blah. There's so many theories, and honestly, for me, those are all conspiracy theories, though it's not that big of a long shot to think, yeah, they probably have stuff that's pre-made for her, and she'll just show the prep for it. Whether she knows how to do it or not is another story. But I definitely think there are some corners being cut here. And I think that's another part of what effectively just leads this to seem disingenuous. Granted, this doesn't have to be super deep. It doesn't have to be about existentialism. But at the same time, a lot of the people who are watching this want some personality. And I can understand having fear due to everything that's happened. But at the same time, people can't guess your personality. If you're not willing to risk a little and show a little of your personality, no one's gonna like you, or a lot of people might not like you because they don't know you. So, or, at least give people the chance to dislike you because they know exactly who you are. At least then, you're not missing out on potential support. But anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.